Hello everybody, Lucas Haneman here, and I wanted to make a quick video this week to commemorate the late, great Jeff Healey. Jeff Healey, Canadian guitar legend, Canadian guitar icon who left us far, far too soon. Jeff Healey passed away in March 2008, and it's hard to believe it's been 12 years now since that man left us. He was just an amazing guitar player, an amazing writer, and an amazing person who I'm happy to say I got to know in the last year or so before he passed away. And I'll tell you guys the story today about that. Around 2007, I was playing with an artist from Ottawa named Alyssa Mahoney, back in the days when I was doing more work where I was kind of backing up other artists. And Alyssa and I, we had a project together, and at one point, we went to Jeff Healey's club because Alyssa knew Jeff. We went to his club in Toronto called Healeys, where he was playing a jazz gig. He was playing all these old jazz tunes, you know, stuff like... you know, all those old jazz tunes, After You've Gone, things like that. Anyways, we went to his gig, and I got to meet him backstage. He gave me, I believe it was this guitar pick, actually. I was searching around. I think it was this one. He played these big triangular picks. And we talked about music. He told me that he really loved old jazz, especially before it became an art form. He really loved really old school jazz, like Dixieland era stuff. And we kind of bonded over that because I really appreciate jazz music. But anyways, after the gig, he was looking for a lift home. And my father, who was there with me, jumped at the opportunity of course he would do that. So we took Jeff to his house. We drove him back to his place in Toronto, and got to meet his wife and his son, who was very young at the time, and just a really amazing family. They were very, very nice people. And Jeff welcomed us in, and we stayed there for about 2.5 hours. He took us down to his studio in the basement and showed us what he was up to. And he took us down to this room where he had this huge record collection. And Jeff Healey was infamous for having this crazy record collection. And I'll explain it to you guys. It was basically like this room that was like 20 feet by 20 feet. And from ceiling to floor, there were all these old 45s. And so, you know, he could go anywhere in this room and take out the record and say, oh yeah, Lionel Hampton played on this one or whatever. And he knew exactly what the lineup was on all these records, and he memorized where they were because he was completely blind, you know. So as a person who's visually impaired, I thought that was a really amazing thing, that this guy was so organized. He knew where everything was. But anyways, if we fast forward a little bit, later on that summer in August 2007, we had the chance to open for Jeff at this big festival in Gananoque called the Festival of the Islands, which was just a huge honor because, I mean, I grew up listening to Jeff Healey's music. I mean, I remember right around the age of 13 or so, I got this album called Get Me Some that was, you know, Jeff's kind of current album at that time. And it was a really, really great album, amazing guitar playing. And it's actually my favorite Jeff Healey album. But, you know, so long before I even thought that I'd meet the guy, let alone get the chance to open for him, you know, I got that album and played it a lot and learned lots of the guitar parts off of it. So it was really, really amazing to then suddenly be on stage in front of 7,000 people and kind of knowing that I was going to be opening for Jeff, one of my all-time heroes. And I'm kind of nerdy, so I dug out the guitar that I brought to the show, and believe it or not, I brought this Fender transistor amp to the show because that's all I had at the time. My tube amp was down, and I only had 2 amps, so I brought this and cranked it up, and it worked. You know, this is actually a very loud amp. This amp right here. And I was thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to make a video. What should I wear? So I even dug out the shirt that I wore because I still have it. I'm such a nerd. I dug out the shirt that I wore at the gig. You know, looking through old photos, I was like, oh yeah, I still have that shirt. So anyways, so kind of a funny thing. And the only thing that's changed is that on this guitar, I've put a Perloyd pickguard now since, you know, from that time. But I remember that day in August 2007, it was one of those situations where we did our sound check and things were running late because the sound guys had to take their union break, you know. So we were up there on stage kind of being like, when's the sound check going to happen? And eventually they came back after eating their dinner. So we had the chance to sound check, and it was really quick. Like we did like a 1-song sound check, and they had Jeff Healey's band waiting in the wings to go up on stage. And so I was getting off stage, and they kind of rushed Jeff and his band up on stage, and Jeff just did this. He hit an A chord, and he was plugged into these 2 high-powered twin amps, you know, in stereo, and he had them cranked up. And I was walking around like just to the back of the stage, and I didn't know because I can't see very well. I was right beside his amps, and just hearing that 1 chord made me literally jump like super high and say, "Oh, you know, insert bad word, you know, oh my God." Like it was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my life at that point. So it was just amazing, you know. We had a great set that night. Had the chance to hang out with Jeff backstage in his trailer. And at that time, he wasn't doing too well. He had cancer, and he'd kind of had been, I remember he had to take some pills, you know, unfortunately, he wasn't doing too great. But you know, he was of the mentality that he was going to kick it and he was going to get over it. So one of the most amazing things was that at the end of that night, we were in Jeff's trailer, like I say, and Jeff said to me right before I got into my car to leave with my family, he said, "Hey man, like I would really love for you to come out to my club and play with me at some point." And I said, "Hey, I would absolutely love to do that. Like let's try to plan it out." And unfortunately, right after that point, Jeff got really sick. He had retinal blastoma, which is basically cancer of the eye. And from what I know, it spread throughout his body, and he didn't make it. In fact, Alyssa Mahoney and I, we were supposed to open for him again in Ottawa, where I'm from, at this venue called Centrepoint Theatre. And Jeff had been taken to the hospital in, I think it was mid-February 2008. And I remember he was on the phone, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get out in time for this tour, and we're going to play for sure in Ottawa." And our gig was supposed to be like that first week of March, I think around the end of the week. And he passed away on the 2nd. So he didn't make it, unfortunately. But man, he was just such a hero to me, and such an amazing guy. And one thing I'll never forget was that night when we were playing at that festival, after our sets, you know, we were standing at the CD table along with him, and that's where that picture was taken. That's the, you know, the thumbnail for this video. We were standing there. He was right beside us, and someone came up to me and they said, "Hey, you know, you sound great. You know, it's amazing that someone so young is playing so great." Because around that time, I think I was 19, and he said, "You know, what are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, no, I'm just trying to, you know, pay this guy a compliment." And he said, "You know, age is just a number. You know, I was playing la 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 la, all this stuff by the time I was whatever." He said, "Yeah, of course, you know, he sounds good, but if you keep saying those kinds of things to him, it's just going to inflate his ego, and he's not going to grow. So we shouldn't say those things to young musicians." And, you know, I really took that to heart, and I continually push myself to be better. I'm never going to be where I want to be as a guitar player, and I have to credit Jeff to, you know, for kind of enforcing that in me, that, you know, we're always going to be growing. And at that point, he was in his 40s anyways, and, you know, he was still growing as a guitar player. And, you know, that's something that, like, I certainly know that until the day I die, I'm going to be growing as a guitar player, too. I mean, I'm nowhere as successful as Jeff Healey, but he certainly was a hero to me, and certainly a hero to many. I remember that night, standing out in the crowd watching him play. It was just the most explosive guitar sound I've ever heard in my life. And, there's just a couple guitar players who I think play with that kind of authority. Jimi Hendrix was one, and Jeff Healey was another, along with Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course. But it's like there's only a few guitar players who really have that force of nature sound. They're just so strong with their right hand. And, of course, Jeff played straight flat in his lap, the guitar flat in his lap. And because of the fact that he could use his thumb of his left hand for vibrato, he had this huge, huge vibrato sound, just an amazing technique. In addition to being a great trumpet player and a great jazz player, of course, he was an amazing rock blues player and a real icon. So that's all I wanted to say. Sorry for not getting a Guitar Tone Tuesday video out this week. There's been a lot going on, but I just wanted to share my experience with Jeff Healey and just say, hey man, so many of us still think of you, and we love your music. So thank you so much.